Officer Danielle Harper had always prided herself on her meticulousness and her sharp instincts, qualities she believed set her apart from her colleagues in the police force. Freshly assigned to a precinct in the heart of the city, she was eager to prove herself, though her confidence sometimes slipped into arrogance. Danielle carried with her an invisible shield of superiority, forged by years of experience in an environment where she had never been challenged to confront her own biases. That evening, after a grueling day filled with paperwork, patrols, and dealing with minor disturbances, Danielle decided to treat herself. Oakwood Bistro was the kind of place she liked, stylish but unpretentious, bustling yet intimate. It attracted a diverse crowd, from young professionals to older patrons who appreciated good food and quiet conversation. Danielle liked the familiarity of the place. It was a refuge from the chaotic world of policing. She arrived just before the dinner rush, slipping into a corner booth where she could watch the room. Her uniform was crisp, her hair pulled back neatly, and her posture rigid, every inch the image of authority she liked to project. As she scanned the patrons, her gaze fell on a man seated alone near the window. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, with an air of calm sophistication that seemed to command the room without effort. Danielle's first impression was complicated. There was something about the man that didn't sit right with her, an instinctive mistrust she couldn't explain. She found herself scrutinizing him, noticing the way his eyes scanned the menu thoughtfully, the relaxed set of his shoulders, and the occasional quiet smile he gave to the waiter. She caught herself tightening her grip on the menu she held, forcing her mind to focus elsewhere. Her phone buzzed suddenly on the table. It was a message from her precinct, a notification about a new commanding officer arriving next week, someone with a strong reputation for leadership and fairness. Danielle barely glanced at the message before dismissing it. Names and faces she didn't know held little importance to her at the moment. She ordered a glass of red wine and a filet mignon, settling in to enjoy her evening. But the uneasy feeling about the man by the window lingered, whispering at the edges of her consciousness. As the restaurant filled with the soft hum of conversation and clinking glasses, the man near the window stood, preparing to leave. Danielle's suspicion, irrational but persistent, flared up sharply. She watched as he approached the door, calm and composed, and without fully realizing why, she felt compelled to intervene. Her mind raced with scenarios fueled by bias and a false sense of vigilance. What if he's casing the place? What if he's here for something illegal? Despite knowing better, these doubts clouded her judgment. With a curt nod to the waiter nearby, she asked quietly, "Who's that man?" The waiter glanced over, then replied, "Oh, that's Mr. Marcus Grant. He's a well-known businessman and philanthropist around here. Comes here often." Danielle's eyes narrowed. "Well-known, huh?" she muttered, but the words felt hollow even to herself. Still, she wasn't ready to let go of her unease. She rose from her seat, her police badge already in hand, though she wasn't officially on duty. Approaching Marcus, she spoke with a tone sharp and clipped. "Sir, I need to see some identification, please." "It's routine." Marcus looked at her with calm surprise, his eyes steady. "Is there a problem, officer?" Danielle's voice tightened. "You don't exactly fit the profile of a usual patron here. I have to be sure you're not causing any trouble." His expression didn't falter, but there was a subtle sadness in his eyes. "Are you implying I'm suspicious because of my appearance?" Danielle felt a flush rise to her cheeks but forced herself to respond, "This is just procedure." Nearby patrons had begun to notice the interaction, their conversations lowering as discomfort filled the air. Marcus handed over his ID without hesitation. Danielle examined it briefly before stepping back, though the tension in the room lingered heavily. Before walking away, Marcus said quietly, "I hope this doesn't affect how you see me moving forward." Danielle said nothing, already retreating to her seat, the weight of what had just happened pressing down on her. Back at her booth, Danielle stared blankly at her untouched meal. Her thoughts churned in a whirlpool of denial and embarrassment. She told herself she had only been doing her job, yet a gnawing sense of guilt crept in, unwelcome and unsettling. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a formal email from the precinct. "Welcome Captain Marcus Grant, your new commanding officer." The message included a professional photograph, an image of the man she had just accused. His confident posture, calm smile, and dignified presence were unmistakable. Danielle's breath caught. The The man she had humiliated was not just any customer, but the very leader she was expected to respect and obey. Panic surged through her, followed by an overwhelming sense of shame. She replayed the scene over and over, each moment sharpening the sting of her mistake. How could she have been so blind? How could she have let her prejudices dictate her actions without a second thought? Desperation pushed her to consider damage control. She knew she would have to apologize, but pride and fear tangled inside her like a knot. An apology was a sign of weakness in her eyes, and yet, the professional and human consequences of her actions left no room for avoidance. Danielle resolved to prepare carefully. She would face Captain Grant, own her mistake, and most importantly, prove that she could learn and grow under his leadership. But deep inside, the arrogant officer was shaken to her core, forced to confront a reality that threatened everything she believed about herself and her place in the world. The next morning, Danielle arrived at the precinct earlier than usual, her stomach tied in knots. The buzzing energy of the station, officers chatting, phones ringing, the steady hum of computers, felt distant, as if she were watching through a fog. She knew the moment she'd been dreading was coming, facing Captain Marcus Grant. She spent the early hours rehearsing her apology, over and over, crafting the words so they would sound sincere without exposing too much vulnerability. Pride fought hard to hold its ground, whispering doubts and excuses. Maybe I don't need to say it like that, she thought. Maybe I can just move on without making it a big deal. But she also knew the stakes were higher now. Captain Grant wasn't just a new boss. He was a man with a reputation for fairness and strength, someone who could see through bravado and recognize true character. Danielle needed to prove she could change, or risk losing more than just his respect. When the roll call ended, and officers began gathering for the day's briefing, Captain Grant entered the room. His presence was quiet but magnetic. He didn't raise his voice or demand attention, yet everyone fell silent. Danielle's heart pounded in her chest. As the briefing ended, Captain Grant approached her with a calm, steady gaze. "Officer Harper," he said softly, "I understand you wanted to speak with me." Taking a deep breath, Danielle nodded. "Yes, Captain. About last night. I owe you an apology. I acted unfairly and without proper cause. I let assumptions cloud my judgment, and I'm truly sorry." He studied her for a moment before nodding slowly. "Thank you for saying that. It's not easy to admit when we're wrong. What matters now is what you do next." Danielle felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. His words carried no judgment, but rather an invitation, to grow, to learn, to face uncomfortable truths. It was a challenge she wasn't sure she was ready for. In the days that followed, Danielle found herself unsettled. Captain Grant's leadership style was markedly different from what she was used to. He didn't command through fear or ego. Instead, he inspired through respect and example. His approach to policing emphasized empathy, accountability, and community connection, concepts that made Danielle uncomfortable, forcing her to rethink long-held beliefs. During briefings, Marcus spoke about fairness and integrity, challenging officers to look beyond stereotypes and treat everyone with dignity. Danielle listened intently, though part of her resisted. Old habits die hard, and arrogance clung stubbornly like a shadow. One afternoon, Marcus assigned Danielle to a community outreach program in a nearby neighborhood, a predominantly minority area she had previously overlooked or regarded with suspicion. She was reluctant but knew refusing would only confirm her weaknesses. At the community center, Danielle met residents who greeted her not with hostility but with cautious hope. She listened to their stories, tales of struggle, resilience, and a desire for mutual understanding. Slowly, the walls she had built around her prejudices began to crack. That evening, alone in her apartment, Danielle stared at her reflection in the mirror. She saw not just the confident officer she portrayed to the world, but a woman grappling with discomfort and change. For the first time, she questioned what it truly meant to serve and protect, and who she really was beneath the uniform. As weeks passed, Danielle's transformation was subtle but steady. She approached her duties with more humility and openness, though moments of old arrogance still crept in. Captain Grant noticed the change and continued to support her, pushing her to confront difficult situations with empathy rather than suspicion. One evening, a call came in about a disturbance at a local restaurant. Danielle and Marcus were dispatched together. Upon arrival, they found a heated argument between two patrons, one of whom was a young black man accused of causing a scene. Danielle's first instinct was old and quick to judge. But then she caught Captain Grant's steady gaze, reminding her silently to stay grounded. Instead of escalating the situation, she took a breath and listened. The young man explained he had been unfairly targeted by staff due to his appearance. Danielle felt a pang of guilt but focused on de-escalating the conflict and ensuring justice was served fairly. After the incident, Marcus pulled her aside. "This is the kind of policing we need, fair, calm, and just. You're learning, Danielle." She nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. The road ahead was long, but for the first time, she believed she could walk it with integrity. Days turned into weeks, and Danielle began to notice subtle shifts, not only in her attitudes but also in how others responded to her. Her colleagues, some of whom had been skeptical of her before, started to see a different side of her. The arrogance that once alienated was slowly replaced by a humility that made her approachable. Captain Grant, meanwhile, remained a quiet but constant presence, guiding without force. He rarely criticized outright, choosing instead to model patience and fairness in every interaction. One afternoon, the precinct held a workshop on implicit bias and community policing, led by Marcus himself. Danielle was one of the first to sign up. The session was eye-opening, forcing officers to examine their own unconscious prejudices. Danielle sat quietly, absorbing stories from community members who shared experiences of discrimination and misunderstanding. Afterward, Marcus asked her to stay behind. "Danielle, you've come a long way, but this work isn't just about policy or procedures. It's about seeing people as they are, beyond the surface." She nodded, the weight of his words sinking in. "I'm trying, Captain. Sometimes it's harder than I thought." He smiled gently. "Growth always is." That evening, as she walked home, Danielle reflected on her journey. The restaurant incident had been a painful wake-up call, but it was also the catalyst for a transformation she hadn't expected. She wondered how many others in her profession needed the same reckoning. Despite her progress, Danielle's past actions cast long shadows. News of the restaurant incident had quietly reached higher levels within the department, and whispers of complaints had surfaced. Some officers still viewed her as arrogant, unwilling to let go of old grudges. One afternoon, Captain Grant called her into his office. The room was modest but orderly, reflecting his straightforward style. He gestured for her to sit. "There's a formal review being scheduled about the incident at Oakwood Bistro," Marcus said calmly. "I want you to be prepared and honest. This isn't just about procedure, it's about accountability." Danielle swallowed hard. She felt the familiar sting of shame but also a growing resolve. "I understand, Captain. I'll face it head-on." Over the next few days, she met with investigators and answered questions about her behavior. It was difficult, reliving the moments of bias and misunderstanding, but she refused to deflect or make excuses. After the review, Marcus approached her once more. "You were brave in facing the consequences. That's the kind of integrity we need." Danielle felt a small but steady pride, not the arrogance of before, but the quiet strength of someone willing to change. One of Captain Grant's priorities was improving relations between the police force and the city's diverse communities. Danielle was assigned to lead a new initiative aimed at fostering dialogue and trust. Her first event was a community forum held at a local church, where residents and officers gathered to share their experiences and hopes for safer neighborhoods. Danielle stood at the podium, her heart pounding, aware of the skepticism in the room. She spoke honestly about her mistakes and her journey toward understanding and respect. Her voice was steady but sincere. "I know I have not always lived up to the values we're trying to uphold," she said. "But I'm committed to learning and doing better, not just for myself, but for all of us." The crowd responded cautiously at first, then with tentative applause. Over time, dialogues opened, and barriers began to fall. Danielle found herself listening more than speaking, learning more from the people she once feared or misunderstood. Captain Grant watched from the back of the room, pride evident in his eyes. The arrogant officer who had once acted out of prejudice was now becoming a bridge, one person at a time, toward healing and justice. The months that followed marked a new chapter for Danielle Harper, not only as a police officer but as a person. The journey from arrogance and ignorance to empathy and leadership had been neither quick nor easy, but it had been real. At the precinct, her colleagues no longer saw her as the brash officer who had judged too quickly. Instead, many began to respect her for the humility she carried now and the dedication she showed to building trust with the community. Captain Marcus Grant's mentorship had been pivotal, but Danielle knew the true work was ongoing. The lessons she'd learned extended beyond policy or procedures. They were lessons about humanity, about the harm prejudice could cause, and the courage it took to face one's own flaws. One late afternoon, after a community event that brought together officers and residents in a shared celebration of culture and solidarity, Danielle found herself standing quietly beside Marcus. "You've come far," he said, eyes warm with approval. She smiled softly. "I couldn't have done it without you, or without the people who gave me the chance to see things differently." Marcus nodded. "Leadership isn't about power or position. It's about service. And you've shown that you can serve with honor." Danielle looked out at the crowd, men, women, and children of every background laughing, talking, and forging new connections. In that moment, she felt something she had never known before: true pride, grounded not in superiority, but in humility and hope. Her past mistakes were not erased, but they no longer defined her. Instead, they became the foundation for a better future, one built on respect, understanding, and the unwavering belief that change was always possible.